All right, welcome back, guys. Welcome to this week's session of pretty much just going to go through a bunch of trade recaps from this week. There was quite a lot of action. We had almost three valid setups, which I personally execute on myself. Some of you guys also managed to get in on the action, which is great. But I thought let's just try to bring these sessions back a bit when I can, just deep diving into a bit of price action and yeah, explaining a bit of my thoughts and stuff throughout the rest of the week. But I think let's go over. I think this is on Wednesday. We had a nice short setup that presented itself. So obviously on the higher time frame, price action was quite bullish. We were, reacting out of this displacement area over here, and a couple guys obviously were in these long positions pretty much in these lows over here after the sweep of the Asia range. So this was on the Tuesday. And then obviously we had a nice continuation push back to the upside. For me personally, I don't trade Asia range on its own solely just because I've found I don't really have an edge there. So I try to look for uh, higher time frame, liquidity sweeps in alignment with that. So if you have a look over here, we pretty much had these resting sell side liquidity, buy side liquidity areas at around 104,345, which we took, which was quite nice. That then formed part of our sort of combination going into Wednesday. So we had already taken this pretty much during the evening on Tuesday, and I was pretty much looking for some sort of reaction out of here and some sort of reversal, potentially back down into this H1 low over here. Um, I like to trade reversion setups. So, pretty much when the market is kind of going against the grain, that's when I'm looking to try and take potential execution setups. So, based off 2 Degrees' lovely tools that he has and indicators for us, I identified these areas here as potential manipulation areas, right? And basically, what I was wanting to see was some sort of push higher in London, kind of take the high, take the previous day high there too, which was sitting around 4350, get a setup, and then potentially trade back into this low or Asia low or whatever it may be. So that was pretty much on the hourly time frame what I was looking for. I keep my analysis super high level and really just honing in on the day-to-day basis. I don't try get caught up in say all the lower time frame and higher time frame, sort of combination if you want to call it that. I try to keep it really simple because the less I'm overthinking on the day, the more clarity I have when I'm executing. So we can be doing whatever on the higher time frame. I'm not really too interested in that. I'm purely looking for mean reversion scalps, if you want to call it that. And yeah, this was pretty much a really nice sort of area of interest to kind of potentially target and look for price to kind of push back down into the lows. So this was Wednesday. Obviously, price opened. We kind of saw um, a little bit of consolidation, and then eventually we saw that pop. Now, if you know how I also like to trade, is very much based on this accumulation, manipulation, and distribution. So if you have a look here, this was now forming my AMD model, and I was then looking for price to kind of take these highs and then start to trade back lower, something like that, right? So now if you have a look on the lower time frame, this was on the M15, we started to see price moving quite nicely. And if you have a look over here, this would have been my M15 low that I was interested in. This was my valid sweep of liquidity. So we swept this high over here. Yes, you don't necessarily have to wait for a fractal in this instance because the fractal low is printing down here. And I personally want to be out by the time we get here. So I'm not going to wait for that to happen when my main liquidity target that I'm targeting is on the H1, which is sitting basically down here, right? So I know a lot of people were in these longs too based on this divergence. Again, great if that's the way you trade. That's not necessarily the way I trade. So great if that is the way you trade. And then pretty much I was looking for some sort of break in structure down here and then pretty much a continuation to the downside. Now, this was a bit more of a different entry model. I'll show you now in terms of how I actually personally executed this. But I mean, even if you're trading this back down to this immediate low here, great R of 2.83 R in the end. We got executed in this position and then price eventually rolled over in Asia evening session, right? I think this was the main low in the end that you were targeting. So just over 2.3 R if you were taking that entry model, which is great. There's nothing wrong with this. Sure, you could have got a bit nervous here with this potential run of, or just say resting liquidity if you want to call it over there. However, what I was personally in was something a little bit different. So playing the M15, M5 inversion. So basically what I had started to see was price. I was quite confident that we were going to see some sort of reversal out of either this manipulation level over here or this ADR tool over here. So when we started to see price kind of set up, this was my M15 low. And you can see here, we had this valid sweep of liquidity here as well. We then had this inversion, which was sitting pretty much over here. So if you have a look on the M5, I was basically, all I was trying to do now from here was look for a break below this level here, a retest of that level, and then something like that. So it's a little bit different from what we normally used to on the M15. But basically, I was wanting to take that short entry based on that retest with my stop just above this high at around 7.5 pips. And then I was wanting to try take out this immediate H1 low, which I think was sitting down here in the end, which I actually ended up getting out of most of my position before then. So if this was something you were in as well, or you were potentially identifying as a trade, and you were also looking to get in on the M5, you're looking at almost 7R return. So yes, depending on, say, your risk appetite, maybe from a M5 point of view, you could have maybe scaled in with, say, a 0.5%, or let's say, for example, your overall risk on the trade is 1%, you could have taken a half on the M5 inversion and another half on the M15 close. That way, I guess you can split the risk a bit more. We basically got the close below. We got that retest into that M5. We then nearly got stopped out. Luckily, had enough space on the actual stop loss in the end, and then obviously price continued to roll over. I end up closing for just under 4R. So for me, that was pretty nice trade. This is a new entry model I've been testing as well. So it's something I'm just having to get used to a bit more, but for the most part, really enjoying the sort of fluidity of the actual model itself. So in the end, there we go. We had our full TP if this is where you were targeting. Excuse me. This sell side liquidity sitting at around pretty much 1.04 flat. I would have given you around 7R, which is a great trade. Then again, if you were just taking on say the actual M15 shift, which would have been over here, and let's say your stop was above this high over here, you would have also managed to bag almost 3.5 R, which is quite, yeah, this is more than enough on a day-to-day basis. Depending on how you want to refine it, if you wanted to maybe take on here, which would have been your M15, you would have bagged over 2.8 R to the low. So that's perfect. Great trade. That was on Wednesday. And then we obviously just continued to see some really positive, price action, I guess, if you want to call it that. We had this sort of decisional demand area sitting over here. That kind of was also in alignment with this. If you want to call these two your areas of interest, which I mentioned in the sort of analysis that I was looking for potential reaction out of one of these two areas and then price to kind of continue back to the upside. So this was on Thursday. We then had price action rollover in London session. Now, again, this was a perfect setup based on the new entry model I've been testing. So in this scenario, my system actually took this trade alongside my actual sort of manual trading. So when I saw this M15 inversion kind of holding over here, basically what I was looking for was some sort of reaction above this area, retesting it, and then continuation back to the upside. Purely looking to take these sort of entry models going forward to increase the risk to reward a bit. Personally, I can bring down my actual total risk I'm using on a day-to-day basis and be able to kind of increase my RR at the same time. So that's basically my thought process and reasoning behind it. I've seen a couple of other traders really, making some decent profits from using this model. And yeah, we had pretty much then seen coming into London Open, price broke above. We retested this area again. So that was why I was also keen on this trade. And then we continued to push from there to the upside. Now, we did get to Asia high and just below this actual manipulation level to the top side quite quickly. And that was the reason I actually took quite a bit of partials off at around, I think it was around 1.3 R, just because of the trade I'd had the day before. I wasn't necessarily too eager in trying to push this further. I could kind of see price action was running out of juice a bit here. Yeah, and then obviously the rest of the day we had some news in the afternoon to be aware of, and I got stopped up break even on the remaining partial trade. I did mention that this area over here, which was pretty much this. So we actually had the manipulation level just sitting inside the sell side liquidity over there. So that kind of then gives me this option down here as a potential manipulation area, which we then actually did have. And yeah, we obviously rocketed from there. So yeah, another way in which you could have potentially, for me personally, I was already quite sort of, done with the trading day by the time we had actually set up this entry model. It was getting close to my cutoff time. But yeah, if we were maybe actually getting this set up during New York session, there's nothing wrong with potentially taking this position. Stops a bit bigger. I think this was due to Trump's sort of speech that was happening. You could have pushed this back to the highs. And I think we actually eventually did get there going into Friday's session, right? So that would have been another setup that I think was quite valid. The only thing I didn't like about this, it was basically about 30 minutes before my cutoff time. So I decided to leave that because I'd already had quite a good week up until then. So I decided to not really put any more risk on the table, and I didn't really know how we were going to react during Trump's speech. So obviously, there's always two sides to the story. Then Friday, again, we had some sell side liquidity taken over here. Just sitting around here. Okay. And if you have a look over here, this is pretty much what I was looking for. I was looking for this manipulation area and potentially this ADR level over here to give some sort of short setup, right? And then potentially grab some entries on the way back down. So we had seen price push quite heavily during London Open. We saw this area kind of holding over here. And then price obviously just continued to push higher. And I'm also, yeah, was quite interested to see if we could potentially get some reactions off here. My potential invalidation point was sitting around over here. So I'm pretty happy to play any entry model sitting within these two standard deviations. And then if we drop down onto, say, the M5, sure, you could have potentially got into the setup coming into London Open. However, what I've noticed is that you don't necessarily want to try have, say, limit entries on these inversion levels pre-London. You want the London or New York session start running, and then you get the setup, right? I haven't really done too much testing in scenarios like this, so for me personally, I'm just leaving examples like that out. And at the same time, I also wanted to see an M15, which there obviously wasn't that over here. So for me personally, I just decided to sit on the side, wait a bit. We then obviously saw price kind of pop quite high, which almost got into this first standard deviation point, which we did get into. And this is where I was kind of now looking to potentially take some shorts because we were quite extended over here. And I was curious to see even if we could just get, say, a pullback into, say, an H1 displacement or whatever it may be. And there's always opportunity in those levels to potentially take some profit off the table. So this was a short position I then took Friday. That was my main sort of target level down here. This was sitting as my M15 structure point. I think it actually developed just over here. So this whole leg would have been your M15 structure point over here. So for me, that's quite big. This is obviously a bit too much. And then obviously if I'm wanting to wait for price action to get all the way back down here, it's going to be a long afternoon. I'm most likely holding that over the weekend. So I think I dropped down into the M10. I can't remember. I think it was the M10. Yeah. And I saw this potentially being, sort of an M15, M10 structure point. And I was then looking for that M15, M5 reversion. It's a little bit more I don't want to say complicated. It's a little bit different to what we used to. So bear with me for the first couple of, say, weeks forward testing this now. But yeah, I was quite keen to see price action break below this M15 or M5 displacement retested, and then potentially look to trade this continuation back to the downside. We then we then failed to close below. However, I actually was running out of time because I needed to pop out somewhere. So I just put a sell limit on this area over here. And I actually, yeah, I think I just market executed as soon as we had broken below. And my entry was sitting just below this or something like that. And then basically I was looking to target this immediate low down here for potentially 3R. And then price obviously rolled over quite nicely. We then had the news coming out. So I started to take off some partials along the way. I think it was at this low here, just before 2R. I decided to take some partials off the table here, mainly because we were getting really close to that news event, and I wasn't really too sure how that PMI data was going to come out. And yeah, rolled to break even, took some partials off there, and pretty much just let the rest run. We got to over 2R in the end. I think it was around, yeah, just 2R on the buzzer. And for me, I was quite happy to just pretty much let the position run the rest of the way into, say, the news event. And then obviously we came out a little bit hotter than expected, and I got stopped out the rest on that break even. So those are the 3 trades I took last week. A bit of a slow start to Jan, but finishing it off quite nicely. I'm excited to see how price action will unfold this week, and yeah, we can go from there. As always, we'll keep you up to date with analysis in the Discord on a day-to-day basis. So I hope you guys enjoyed this trade recaps video, and I'll catch you in the next one.